What you're about to see is a remote viewing session that was done totally blind by the remote viewer. Now, I'm going to tell you what the target is so that you can follow along, but remember the remote viewer does not know this target when they're describing what the session is all about. And at the end of the session, we will tell the remote viewer what the target was so that you can actually see the response. So the target for this session is the death of Jeffrey Epstein. And we're going for the moment of death for Jeffrey Epstein. So one thing that's different about this from when we did this long ago is that with this particular targeting, we're using what we call anti-blocking techniques so that people or AIs or any type of extraterrestrial influence cannot stop us from seeing what actually happens. So this is a little different from the original project we did on Jeffrey Epstein years ago, where we did not use the anti-blocking techniques. In addition, we're going after the actual moment of his death so that we can see how he actually died. All right, so this is the death of Jeffrey Epstein. All right, Aziz, we are ready for your deep news session. So why don't we just skip the preliminaries and just go right to your page 4, which is, and just for the audience sake, you do not know the target or anything about this, right?
Nope, don't know the target.
So we're going to go through the target, your session rather. We're going to go through your session, and then I'll tell you what the target is at the end of the session.
Sounds good. All right.
All right. So why don't you start with your page 4? And what did you pick up here?
Yeah, so the first thing that comes to mind on page 4, I was seeing this level topography based surface. It seemed like there was this environment was inside of a structure, seeing multiple subjects, brownish hues. There was a sort of grid pattern. I deducted it for a bookshelf or something, just it was up against the vertical surface inside the room. And then there was also this subject that seemed to be having some darker hues and quite burly. It was sort of looming in the background over there, and that pretty much started us off on page 4. As I went on to page 5, I actually began to notice two subjects, a subject A and a subject B, and they were facing each other, and there was sort of a circular shape inside the room between them. But that was pretty much the environment that I was looking at.
Okay, now when you say a grid surface in the background, that's you're deducting a bookshelf, but that doesn't mean a bookshelf. That means a grid pattern behind it.
There was a grid pattern. I don't know if it was a bookshelf. That was the deduction.
Yeah. Okay, why don't we go, so you focused initially on this one subject, and then you noticed there was a second subject B in the room.
Yeah.
Why don't you then go to page 6, where you describe the first subject.
All right, so the first subject I called subject A, and it seemed like they had whitish light hues to the hair. Subject looked a little older, and I wasn't sure if it was facial hair or just flabby, wrinkly skin on the neck. Going into a deep mind probe, it just seemed like there was maybe high blood pressure. I mean, it was a real tense feeling inside of subject A, and subject A sort of, it just feels like he's going around doing things, and the mind seemed to be this big flurry of thoughts, and he was focused on the physical activity of his own body. It seemed like he was pretty exhausted from not too much movement that he was doing. I mean, he was a bit frantic, but I mean, he wasn't running a marathon or anything like that, but he was still feeling exhausted, and there was a lot of stress going through his body. I mean, it feels like he was having this stretched out panic attack, more or less. That was pretty much the whole gist of what was going on in the mind of subject A.
Okay. Then you went to subject B, which was somebody else in the room. So what did you get there?
Yeah, so subject B was the bigger, burlier person relative to subject A. Had shorter hair, darker hues hair. I started deducting stuff like a Secret Service agent or a bodyguard or something like that. I mean, he just seemed like a big buff guy in a suit. And he had formal attire-ish on. I mean, his presence was really imposing on subject A. So subject B seemed like his mind, when I jumped into his mind seemed far more clear, not as frantic. It was clear-headed, and it was focused and sharp and really dialed in on subject A, observing his actions, his emotions, observing his stress. And I almost sensed a sense of pity for subject A because he seemed so feeble-minded and stressed out in this state in front of subject B. But it was like subject B was maintaining this strong frame and this strong demeanor. Just he was significantly taller than subject A, and just subject A kind of looked like maybe he sat down for a while. He was seated in front of subject B as well. So I mean, that was the difference. I mean, they were both male subjects. One was just really stressed out, and the other one was quite imposing to the other one.
Okay, well then you went into a timeline of what happened with those two subjects in the room. Why don't you go through that whole timeline?
Yeah, so basically it seemed like subject B, he begins to firmly point to and sort of speak strongly to subject A. The subject B reminding you guys that he's the big burly subject. So he starts pointing to subject A, speaking strongly to them, and subject B even like begins to push objects off from like a desk. I mean, it seems like he's doing intimidation-y type of stuff, and it seems like subject B is causing subject A to start shaking and thinking that he started to scatter and scramble, and mentally just is becoming very frazzled. This is subject A. And subject A is also starting to speak later on with this idea after he sort of had this moment to shake and, start scrambling mentally. He starts to speak out an idea to subject B. Now, it seems like at this point there's multiple formal attire looking subjects, maybe 3 of them, speaking to subject A. And then subject A is also jittery, and he's pulling himself together to try to speak and say stuff to these other formal subjects. And then it seems like subject A is grabbed by the neck area, the collar area, and he's being attacked, he's being hit in the head, and subject A is sort of left in this bloody heap on the ground, all curled up. And it doesn't really feel like subject A is alive. It seems like he's sort of just leaning up against a vertical surface of some sort. And subject B, and I guess the other subjects, they just leave. And it seems like some subject is in a new environment now. Like if I just keep following the timeline forward, I'm seeing some other subject in a whole new environment speaking to a lot of subjects. It's this like urban environment with multiple subjects, and I'm hearing these loud booms and crackle sounds, but there's an empty space, multiple subjects, and an urban environment. And that pretty much ends the interaction and all of my session data. I mean, it really just seems like subject A and subject B are in some sort of conversation. Subject A is very intimidated, very afraid, very scrambling mentally, and then subject B, it just increases that intimidation factor until eventually beating the tar out of him, and he subject A dies. So
yeah, so the subjects so when the actual interaction happens, you end up picking up 3 extra subjects, not one, in the room.
Yeah.
And after subject A dies, your perception shifts to some other subject in a different environment speaking.
Yeah, that was pretty much it.
That's part of the overall event. There's some type of announcement or speaking that's going on, but that's clearly not subject A doing the speaking, but somebody else
Somebody
outside.
else, yeah.
And it looks like then you're in an urban, it's clear that this whole thing is taking place in an urban environment.
Yep, that's it, 100%.
Okay, so you ready for the target reveal?
Yep, I'm ready.
Okay, so you'll see a folder on your computer that says target, and why don't you click that and click open the file that has the target.
Oh, well, look at that.
Yeah, the death of Jeffrey Epstein.
Interesting.
The focus is the death of Jeffrey Epstein.
Hmm.
So according to your data, he was killed by a group of 3 people. Well, it'd be interesting to compare that with the other viewers. Typically when some governmental form assassinates someone, they typically send 3 people. And one person is usually the killer. If it's by gun, that would be the sharpshooter. And then the other person is the person who's making sure everything goes okay in the environment and then nobody escapes and whatever. And then the third person is the lookout to make sure no one's coming in or whatever. So they usually use 3 people. And so it was interesting you came up with 3 people, with one of them being the burly guy, the big strong guy. He's the killer.
Well, he definitely died. I mean, he was killed by those people. I mean, I saw him sort of taking a lot of hits to the head, and then he died. So that was pretty much it. He's dead.
Looking at your session, you described him perfectly in a prison environment. The grid background, the grid pattern in the background was clear. Those are bars.
I guess, yeah, it could have been bars. That was I didn't know we were in a prison sort of environment, but that was definitely, there was a grid pattern behind one of the subjects, the burly subject. So, and that also makes sense. It would probably be the entrance into whatever room would be that sort of matches. If somebody entered into a cell, then there would be a grid pattern behind them.
On your page 4, you have the grid pattern behind subject A, which would be Jeffrey Epstein.
No. I don't think I labeled that person subject
That was
A at
the
that
first.
point.
That's the major target, and that's the person you originally focused on.
Page 4?
Page 4.
I didn't label that person as subject A.
It's just that was the target, and that was the first person you saw.
That was the first person I saw, but still, that was a big subject that seems to have darker hues. That was
I see.
was in front of a grid pattern, but he's not been labeled subject A.
Yeah, you didn't label it. You didn't label that until you got to page 5.
Yeah, I actually have him just as the dominant session element is that subject, and then I have another subject, a second subject in front of him.
Fascinating. Okay.
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting, when he was discovered, he was slumped over. Very much, your picture is very, he was sitting up, slumped over. He was...
After being bashed in the head.
They made it look like he was strangled. He strangled himself, but...
Yeah, they just killed him. They just bludgeoned him and killed him, and then left him in a slumped, bloody heap. And so that was him. That's how he died.
Yeah, they made it look like he was he hung himself. But it was clearly it was in that type of position.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was a great session, Aziz.
Thanks.
You're going to be interested to see what the other viewers got, and everyone. This is the interesting thing about this. We have multiple corroborating reports with nobody knowing what the target is, and they all describe the same thing. So it looks like Jeffrey Epstein was clearly killed.
All right. Well, that's an interesting one. Thanks.
All right. Okay. Well, on to the next one.
On to the next one.